Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're beginning to fill in the room and we'll have a welcome from Denver Startup Week in just a moment. So thank you all for being here. Maybe a little technical difficulty with that welcome. Yeah, it looks like that video is not working. So maybe we will just get started and that's okay. Right, you all are here because you're part of startups um, and you're here to learn today. And so thank you for working with us and rolling with us. So excited to have everybody here today. You are hopefully in the right section and we'll get this PowerPoint going. All right. So hopefully you intended to come to Like a Boss, creating organizations where women of color thrive. If this wasn't the session you meant to come to, the universe brought you here. So I hope we're all going to have a great time today. Let's get started with a little bit about, what we're talking about today. I'll begin with a story. So I am currently the executive director of Colorado Common Cause, where I work on voting rights and government transparency. Prior to that, I was the CEO of a cannabis startup. So had about 50 employees and I had the cred, right? In my first year on the job, I doubled profits, right? I increased diversity of my staff within the first 18 months by about 40%. It was amazing. I built this great team. And yet I would walk into rooms, I would walk into meetings, I would walk into presentations and feel like, oh my gosh, I don't deserve to be here, right? Or I'm a fraud, or they're going to figure out that I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I think anybody who's been in a leadership position has had that feeling, right? And it took me a really long time to learn and to realize that a lot of people feel this way. I wasn't alone. That I had to do it anyway, right? There wasn't an option. And finally, that The folks in that room were not any smarter or better than I was, right? That was the first time in my life that I found myself, in front of venture capitalists that could write multi-million dollar checks. And that was really intimidating. And then I got in those rooms and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm not the dumbest one here. Right. And so that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. The other thing that I realized is every time I thought I was the dumbest one there, I called my girlfriends, right, and said, can I do this? Am I smart enough? And so we're going to have kind of an informal conversation today. And you all get the benefit of my like dream team, smartest women I know, to kind of help talk you all through some of this as well. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about imposter syndrome, that not being able to shake that feeling that you didn't earn an accomplishment, right? Or that feeling of insecurity, even though like you have the credentials. And I love these little memes, right? But we've all felt this way where we're like, oh, surely these folks in this room are going to realize that one of these things is not like the other, and I don't belong here, right? And it's just not true most of the time. And in case you were feeling like the dumbest one in the room, I thought I'd introduce Maya Angelou to you because, right, who doesn't feel right next to her? But she talks about how she had written 11 books at the time of this quote. And at every turn always thought, oh no, like they're going to figure out that I've just run game on everyone, right? They're going to figure out that I'm an imposter. And so one of the things that I want to make sure we all remember is that this is not necessarily something that we can educate or accomplish our way out of, right? That people like Michelle Obama and Maya Angelou have talked about the ways imposter syndrome showed up and continued to show up in their life, even once they had this really unparalleled success. And so things that we know about imposter syndrome, again, keep this part short because I want you all to hear from the folks that really are smarter than I am. The imposter syndrome isn't only bad for individuals, it's bad for teams. It's the thing that will stop brilliant people on your team for applying for the promotion, for applying for a job, for bringing that idea forward, for speaking up in meetings, right? And so when you've got a bunch of folks in your building, in your office, in your organization that are experiencing this, you're not going to get the best out of them, right? And it's going to hold you back from being your best self. Again, you can't accomplish or educate your way out of this. There are lots of accolades and accomplishments on the resumes of everybody on this panel today, and we all absolutely still feel this way. And I wanted to highlight that this is a systemic issue. We'll talk a little bit more about those systems, and is often more acute for women and people of color, especially in organizations that don't have a lot of diversity. And then I just wanted to kind of go over a couple terms in case any of this is jargon to folks, wanted to make sure that we're starting from the same page. Some of us might use the phrase BIPOC, so that is Black, Indigenous, people of color. I will say brown folks often as an umbrella term. We may say words like transgender or cisgender. Cisgender is the one that is often new for folks, but that's just a person whose sense of personal identity and who they are corresponds to the sex that they were assigned at birth. And then I just wanted to highlight that, especially because we have a panel of exceptional women of color, I just wanted to highlight that no experience is universal. So please, please, please do not go back to your office, your friends, your happy hour tonight and say, oh my goodness, well, I heard from this Mexican-American woman and she said blah, 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 blah. And so that's how all Chicanas feel. It's just not true. It's never going to be. We've found some really fantastic folks to speak with you today, but just wanted to make sure that we all knew that those experiences are really, we're speaking for ourselves and our experiences. And so with that, let's get it kicked off. I didn't do big introductions, in part because I didn't want everybody to have to like carry all of their credentials with them. That doesn't always define us. But I will just ask my panelists the first time you speak, if you could maybe just introduce yourself, that would be fantastic. I'm Amanda Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Common Cause. I use she, her pronouns. And just to get this kicked off, I've done a little bit of an overview around imposter syndrome. How has this shown up in each of your lives? And what was your reaction to getting asked to be on this panel? And maybe Tiffany, if we could start with you.
Well, good morning. I am Tiffany Wackler, and I am the Development and Communications Director at the local nonprofit Scholars Unlimited. This is my 20th year in the nonprofit sector, and I spent most of it doing like consulting work with different nonprofits across the country with a company called Op3. So I live in the nonprofit space, and what's interesting is I've gotten to this kind of leadership role at this nonprofit in an untraditional way. I don't have a degree. So it's very interesting. Sometimes when I'm applying for jobs, I tended to apply for all the stretch jobs. I saw all the talents and skills they're looking for. And then the roadblock was this degree. And I was like, well, I know a lot of dumbasses that have degrees. And so I feel like I'm pretty awesome. So I tried to lean into the skills that I had and really try to take up space to learn. I volunteered, I was on boards. I really just tried to take up space to learn so that I had the cred when I came to doing something. And for me, sometimes it shows up when I'm in conversations or in a room. I'm often the only woman of color in a room. And sometimes I feel like there's things where I feel like I'm imposing imposter syndrome on myself. So like I get there, I'm a consultant in a new org. I don't know their culture. I don't know their cause. I don't know their voice. And I just got to fake it and make sure you have what it takes, just kind of do it. That's when I feel like I'm putting it on myself. But sometimes I feel it's almost imposed on me when someone says, where'd you go to school? What's your degree in? Because I want to know what's behind that question. And so that's a time where I feel like people are actually trying to make me feel less than in the room. And so those are kind of two ways that I feel like it shows up in my life. Being asked to be on this panel, I felt like an imposter when I was like, did I sign up for this? Am I the person for this? And so I'm really excited to be here and to be able to share kind of some tips and tricks and what's worked well for me on my journey.
Yeah. And Rep Caraveo, you've been in a lot of spaces where you're first.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Amanda, for asking me to be part of this panel. I remember kind of in the last 5-10 years learning about imposter syndrome and being like, so that describes the feelings that I have whenever I'm in a new situation. I am a pediatrician, so I went to medical school here in Colorado, did my residency in New Mexico, and about 7 years into being a pediatrician, decided to run for the state legislature. And I have finished my 3rd year as the state representative for House District 31. And in the last month, announced that I am running for Congress. And so imposter syndrome is unfortunately something that I deal with all the time. It ranges from being the first in my family to go to college and go to medical school. I'm still convinced that I somehow did not actually graduate from medical school. Whenever I get an email or a call from the med school, which is usually asking for alumni, contributions back, I'm like, yep, that's it. This is when they finally figured out that I didn't somehow fulfill the graduation requirements and I'm not actually an MD, even though I've been practicing forever. We have it at the state legislature, right? There's lots of spaces where suddenly you look around and you realize that not only are you the only person of color, but you're the only woman sometimes in the space, and you get treated that way, where people talk over you. The men kind of try to come to a decision, even though you might be the quote unquote highest ranking person in the room. I get it as a pediatrician all the time. When I walk into patients' rooms and somebody, a parent will be on the phone, and it's not like they consciously think of this, but they say, oh, hold on, the nurse just walked into the room. And so it's something that's really imposed on us all the time. And then we're shocked that we internalize it and that we feel this way in every single situation. But really it's because every moment of our life, somebody is kind of either consciously or unconsciously questioning our credentials and whether we should be part of this, of a certain space. I've gotten it as a part of my campaign for Congress when people have asked, well, you're only 40, which, that's the first time that I've ever heard only 40. But why can't you just wait your turn? Why do you think you should run now? And so I think that it's really important to think of the fact that this is something external that gets very much internalized in all of us, and that sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing to ourselves because it's such a norm of how we're treated in every single space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, does that sort of internal external tension feel true for you, Sheena?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheena Kadi. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a queer Arab American millennial woman. I currently serve as the Communications Director and Public Information Officer for the Colorado Department of the Treasury. I also serve as the Vice Chair for the DNC's LGBTQ Advisory Board. Gosh, when Amanda first asked me to serve on this panel, part of me was like, is she asking the right person? I understand the privilege that I have as presenting as white in certain spaces. Also, having Amanda remind me that we talk about this all the time. Amanda is part of my group of badass women that I keep myself surrounded with, and excited to talk about that later. For me, as with many folks, it shows up in so many different ways. I remember I've been working in politics for the last 18 years, all across the country and internationally. In 2013, I was recruited to execute a progressive statewide campaign in Indiana, specifically because I have so much experience building and recruiting diverse teams. When I was brought on, I was told that this is why that they were hiring me. They were really excited to work with me and bring me onto the team to be able to build out this diverse team. They set some unrealistic expectations from the get-go. They were like, cool, we want to have everybody hired and onboarded in 2 weeks. All right, challenge accepted. We'll see what happens. As I'm sure no one is surprised here, that did not happen. And in building that team out, we recognized that a lot of the folks who were initially applying were cisgender, hetero, white men, which was not necessarily the representation of the diversity that we were looking for in building this team together. When I went back to our boards, and told them that we needed more time to do so, I got some pushback. And said, they told me that it was clearly communicated as to why I was hired, and that they wanted folks hired and onboarded within the first 2 weeks. I got to tell you, in that moment, I felt my stomach drop, and I thought to myself, have I failed? No, I haven't failed. There were some unrealistic expectations. And after communicating that, after pushing back, after clearly communicating next steps in terms of how we were going to, changes that we were going to make in order to recruit more diverse teammates, folks listened. Because again, I was recruited because I had the experience. I had the skills and ability to be able to recruit and build out a team that was reflective of the work that we were trying to do. It shows up in so many different spaces. Just here a couple of years ago, I found myself in political spaces and I'm like, it seems like decisions are being made before I even get into the room. It seems like decisions are being made. Turns out there was this poker game that was going on once a month where all of these white, cisgendered, hetero, male politicos were getting together. And it was during this poker game that these decisions were being made. So I wasn't out of my mind. I wasn't crazy. Decisions were actually being made before folks got into the room. And I told myself I will do anything and everything I can to get into this poker game. Excited to say I'm now one of 2 women who regularly play with these 30 or 40 odd men in this space. But it's about recognizing the spaces where we aren't invited as well and kind of elbowing our way in. So lots of examples, excited to chat with folks about how it shows up for them today.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think, one of the things you said is, am I crazy? Right. And I think that is the moment where you often feel this very acutely, right? Is because you're sitting in a room and you're saying, I feel nuts, right? And I think both Tiffany and Sheena talked about the value in the stretch, right? Whether that's applying for a position that, the job description is poorly written and seems to exclude you for no good reason. Or it's a space where nobody's like you and you haven't been invited to it, right? But I think that there is often value in that stretch, right? And so for anybody on the panel, a time when that has been true for you, where just doing the thing either helped to combat some of imposter syndrome, or where the growth was worth it. I feel like all of you, we've talked about this. Yeah.
I think that with most things that I've done, there's been a feeling of a stretch there that, I've been fortunate enough to grow up in a family that told me, they immigrated here from Mexico for a certain reason. And it was for that stretch, right? To give their kids that opportunity to do whatever they thought they could apply themselves to. And where it was never questioned that, yes, you can do whatever you set your mind to. But with every single time that I stretched myself and decided I'm going to medical school, even when people told me like, you can't go to medical school, go to nursing school, or going to the state legislature, different things like that. The need to do that stretch was within me and from my family. But I feel like this feeling of being an imposter and of society and even specific people telling you can't do that creates a huge amount of stress and anxiety and pressure on each of us who decide to make that stretch that isn't there for example, a hetero cis white male, because they are constantly told, of course you should do that. That's your destiny. The stretch is something that you constantly do as a white man, and it's not questioned. And so I feel that like for the four of us here, we have imposed those stretches on ourselves, and we've had communities that have been very supportive of those, but it still would have been a much easier path if that societal pressure hadn't been there saying, I don't know that you can really do this.
I agree. And I also think that, I mentioned that I often apply for the stretch job. I also need money. So sometimes I got to take the job that they think that I can do. So I think in some of those situations, I think of a job that I felt like I should be hired as the director for the role. And they kind of came back to me like, you seem great, but how about you take this lower position? We just kind of did the last round of interviews for this director. And I was like, okay. And so I started the job, and instantly I started to be able to see where I could make an impact. And I was like, ooh, there's some things that you could do much better. And I think I know how to get you there. And so I started to just kind of lead from the seat I was in and tracking those successes so that when I was going to propose a change, I could really stand on each stepping stone of what I'd done. And I think sometimes it's hard to get that all at one spot, like looking back. So I really try to track it in real time. Like, what am I doing here to make an impact? And where is this happening? Where am I hearing people say I've made an impact? And what ended up happening is I discovered that there was a hole in the organization and that they needed a different role to be successful and do what they were doing. So needless to say, the director got booted because he wasn't the right person for the job. And I made a position that made sense for the organization that better served them. So I didn't get the stretch job, but I decided that I was going to create it in my own space. And so I think there's been instances I've come in and like, listen, I need a paycheck. I can do this job and I can do it well, but how can I elevate this and how can I try and stand out? Because ultimately I have a bigger agenda. So I feel like sometimes you really have to step into spaces and lead from where you are. Because like you said, there's sometimes it's really supportive and everyone's ready to help elevate and lift you up. And there's other spaces where they're really happy if you just sit where you are. And so I think having a little bit of that confidence boost to be able to say, like, not only am I bright and in the right space, I'm going to help you by elevating some of the things that we do. So I think that's where sometimes a stretch happens, where I don't want people to think just you go and apply for this job and they're like, good job, nice meeting you. I did one just previously and it was for an ED position. And she wrote back to me, like, I didn't get an interview. She's like, well, this resume is interesting. And that's all she said. So I was like, oh, that is interesting. Touche. But at the end of the day, like some of the stuff that was interesting and the variety of skills I have is what's made me be successful in spaces. So I think kind of embracing that and letting some of other people's perceptions of you be none of your business, and like not let that be your stopping point.
Oh gosh. It's amazing, isn't it? Like as kids, it's like you can grow up to be anything that you want to be, like as broad and as vast as your dreams are. And then once we start to get into these spaces, whether it's in school, extracurricular activities, in social settings, we slowly begin to find ourselves in those sound chambers where it's like, no, you can't do this, or that's an interesting thought. Tell me, with Dr. Representative Caraveo, that's interesting. Why do you think you can be a doctor? Or why do you think that you can be the CEO at a cannabis startup? Why do you think that you can apply for these jobs even if you don't have the education background? I got to tell you what, like life is hard enough as it is. And like if I'm the only person that's ever going to be an advocate for what it is that I want and need. Something that I've learned over the years. Stretch opportunities, they can be scary, right? They can be terrifying, especially when they don't pan out. For me, I like to keep an eye on those stretch opportunities where I can have an impact on the role that I'm currently in. So for example, we've heard a little conversation today about badly written job descriptions, right? It's been when I found myself in a position of power to be able to influence what our job descriptions looked like and where they were shared and what the hiring process looked like. Being able to be in a position to be like, no, we don't need to have education requirements on a supervisory role. No, we don't need to have a minimum of 4 years of an undergrad and a preferred graduate degree for a director of communications. Being able to find those stretch opportunities within the positions that I hold to be able to influence those small changes within the organization, those are the ones that I get the most excited about. And I will be honest, I do tend to come from a position of asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah, which I think is great, right? Because one of the privileges that is often not afforded to women of color is the opportunity to fail forward, right? That and you learn so much from that, but we often don't have that luxury. And I think it's all great to like stretch and grow and do the thing, but like, when you keep getting rejected, I know when I was on the job search one time, I was like, I was so proud of myself because I was applying to all these big girl jobs that like I knew I could do, but I wasn't sure everybody else would know I could do. And then when you like don't get 3 of those interviews, right, or you don't make it past the first round of those interviews, you're like, yeah, I was wrong, right? I don't belong there, right? And so I actually think that some of that norming behavior, that information that we get from others, is part of what helps combat imposter syndrome within ourselves, right? So these can be simple things. So, I think actually all of you have done this for me, but I do a lot of work in the Capitol, and there have literally been times, I don't think I've said this to you, Rep. Caraveo, where I've seen you even just wearing powerful, chic, good-looking clothing that isn't masculine, right? And just what does that tell me about like what it's okay to do? How to, it shifts culture. Conversely, I think one of these moments for me, I was in law school and they did this hour-long presentation about what it was appropriate to wear to an interview. I was like, I've been a professional before this, right? I know what to wear to an interview. And of course, for men, it was wear a suit. And that was like the beginning and the end of it. And then we spent 45 minutes critiquing what women should or shouldn't look like. Right. And I remember being at Nordstrom Rack and taking a picture of a shoe that was very professional, lovely little Cole Hand shoe with a peep toe and texting a friend and saying, do you think I can wear this to an interview? Right. Like, is my big toe going to be too scandalous? But the more important thing to me was that I was doubting myself in that moment, right? I'd had good professional jobs, and then suddenly I didn't trust myself to buy a goddamn shoe. Right? And so, I think we know some good and some bad things, but I'd love to hear from an organizational perspective, things that you all have done or things that you've seen done in organizations to help combat some of that imposter syndrome that we know is happening and that we know is having a disproportionate impact on women of color.
Oh, I feel like I could talk about that all day. For me, it's the biggest influential piece in that is hiring. When I find myself the only woman, the only queer person, the only person of color on a leadership team within an organization, I know I'm going to have an uphill battle, right? So then for me, what I become tasked with is changing that, recognizing, I'm sure we've all worked at organizations where we like to think that information flows from the bottom up, but realistically, a lot of things flow from the top down. Knowing that if you're really looking to influence an organizational or team culture, it is so important to make sure that those who are setting that tone, those who are setting the directive, share that identity and share that ideology with you. So for me, it comes back to making sure that the diversity and inclusion that I want to see represented within the organization is reflected within the staff, specifically amongst any leadership teams.
I would say one thing that I think that I've been fortunate in a lot of the organizations I've been a part of is that I've had women owners of the business, or I've had women in leadership. I sit on a leadership team that's all women, which is kind of a unique experience. It's pretty awesome, I think. But one of the things we do that's really important is I think we name success and we call it out. I feel like sometimes in your organization, you see the talent in someone and you take for granted that they know that they're awesome. So actually voicing it and giving people the accolades they deserve to help reinforce that you were the right person for this, you did this, you're great, you got this. I think just being a cheerleader for people on your team and being vocal, because I think there are some things that you just see and that you don't always call out for them. So I think part of it's just that cultivation amongst your team. And I think sharing power. I feel like there are a lot of situations where I love to control every aspect of my life. It's not working well for me because you can't do that. But I think there are some things that are really by design and not by default. And if you really work at sharing some of that power, people will start to show you their strengths. And I think it just enriches your organization as a whole. I think so often once we get that leadership role or that influential seat, we're holding real tight to it. We earned it. We want to stand firm in it, but there's really a lot of power in sharing it. So I think that's another thing that kind of, as you're looking in your organizations or in your spaces, where are you sharing power? Who are you sharing it with? Who isn't at the table? And who haven't you kind of illuminated on their skills that they heard you say it just as much as they're hearing it internally?
I think for me, it's this is probably going to be frightening to people who are not in medicine, but we're always told fake it till you make it, because a lot of telling people I know what I can do for you and I know how to treat you is to exude that confidence, and it works in other areas. I think that even when you're feeling you're doubting yourself the most, right? You're the only person of color in the room. You're the only woman in the room, but you know what power you hold, whether it's your degree, whether it's whatever position that you hold, whether it's your experience, whether it's a cool title before or after your name. You have to kind of embrace that and know that that sometimes you have to exude confidence that you might not have, but you have to put up that front. There's been many times in negotiations with on bills, for example, where the people are talking down to me and they're trying to be like, oh, just pat me on the head metaphorically, and just be quiet and listen to what the white men have to say. And I push back and make sure that I get some eyebrows that are raised. And afterwards, I'm like, holy crap, I cannot believe that I did that. But at the end of the day, I'm the representative in the room and you're going to listen to me. And so for as much discomfort as it may cause, hold on to those pieces of you that give you your power, and don't let people push those away. Use them to push against them.
And I think, so much of this is institutional, right? That it is, I feel like the moments when I get most intimidated is when I think there's a set of rules that I don't understand and I don't want to make an ass out of myself, right? And oftentimes it's like, well, how do we figure out those rules? Whether you're in the Capitol or in a university or in a new job, especially if it's a more homogenous space and you're like, oh, there seems to be a culture here, right? But I don't exactly know what that is. I think when we are in leadership roles, providing those breadcrumbs to other staff members and other folks of color to say, oh, hey, this is how this thing is done, can go such a long way, I think, to Tiffany's point about confidence and feeling of belonging, right? Somebody feeling like they do belong here and they do know what the rules are. I'm curious if there have been champions, either professionally in organizations or maybe it's in your personal life, that have helped sort of do that for you, and talking about the things that other people maybe have done for you that have been really successful in helping you to maybe not overcome imposter syndrome, but at least live with it. If you have success stories where somebody has helped you feel like, yeah, no, I can do this.
Yes. Amanda, something that you touched on earlier was just keeping this badass group of women around you. I can't tell you just how beneficial that has been, not only for my personal and professional development, but for my own sanity. When I find myself in those spaces where I am different or I am not the same as, wondering if I'm crazy, wondering if I'm showing up in I'm too brown or I'm too queer, spaces where I speak up and wonder, well, am I going to be seen as like the aggressive woman here? Are people going to listen to what I have to say? Or do they just see me as an agitator in the space because I'm pushing back against something that was said or done? I can't tell you how helpful it is to keep an amazing network of folks that you can pick up the phone, that you can shoot a text to, that shares some of those similar identities or experiences as you. So that way you can get that affirmation that, no, we're not crazy. Yes, fuck them. They were being a jackass. They were being racist. They were being sexist. They were being classist, whatever it is. But having that group for me of women, people of color, those that identify as LGBTQ, to be able to reach out with. My other kind of tangible thing that I love, I put together music. I recognize music is one of the fastest ways that I can like influence my own mental state. So putting together this Feeling Myself playlist, thank you, Beyonce. Whenever I find myself going into a space where I know I'm likely the only person who's going to check all of these boxes in the room and need that boost of confidence going in, I just put on that playlist and I am ready to go and feel like I can take on the world when I enter that space.
I love your playlist. And I feel like, Amanda, you're like the queen of commanding lipstick. Like, she comes so hard with the strong lipstick. I went on and put my little nude one on a little while ago and I was like, this is pretty disappointing. I need to bring my Amanda lipstick so I can command the room. So I think sometimes it is those little things, and walking in the room and saying, I'm a 10. I think that, we've talked a lot about being women or women of color, but there's times when you're walking in the room and someone's singing your lesson because of your body shape or size, because of your age, there are so many other things, your abilities. And so like well, we, I think, have the voice from our perspective as women of color. I think there's a lot of spaces where you're going to come in and someone's going to have already decided that you're less than. So I think when you're going into spaces or you're presenting, or, you're kind of coming up like into a room, I always like to do a good dress rehearsal. I always try things out on folks. So to Sheena's point about like the room of, or your tribe of folks, but I also make sure I go to my honest friends, because you all have that friend that will tell you what you want to hear, and that just thinks that the sun shines out of your ass. And I love that person too. There's a time and place for that person. But I think when you're coming into a situation where you're not feeling super confident, like look for those honest people too, because I think sometimes maybe you aren't the best person, or you need to polish something more, or they're going to bring that little bit of the pushback that you need to know, like, hey, this is something I can anticipate. So I think some of it is also having the people that are going to be honest with you, who champion you and believe in you, but also are willing to call you out on your crap, frankly. And so I think that's fun. I love a good power suit. I love a good pair of heels. I think some of it is just some of that stuff you put in so you feel good and kind of fake it till you make it. And if you look good, then maybe you'll sound good. Like some of that does trickle down, I think, into your psyche a bit. So I also love just a good playlist. I try and channel my Amanda lipstick, and I go to the people who are honest.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely kind of embracing the fact that you're going to fall into groups that make sense for you, that you're going to kind of naturally gravitate to the people that you need around you, that are going to provide you with confidence, and like you ladies here, and who are going to be able to, in those moments when you're like, I can't do this, to say, okay, I know that you feel like that, but you've felt like that before, and you have to kind of get past this moment, and the many moments that are going to come after this, and just keep going.
And I also think that even hearing that from you all, I know that, when friends call me and say, am I crazy? Or I'm having a really hard time with this, or I feel like I don't belong here, it actually makes me feel better, because I'm like, she's brilliant. Like, I'm talking to somebody who is like smart and commanding and kicking ass in her career. And she's saying that she feels this way, right? So like I've literally, not recently, but I've literally crawled under a desk at a job, like shut my door, crawled under, was like, I'm just gonna have a moment here. I've worked in nonprofits, small spaces, right? And when those moments are happening, I can remember, I'm like, no, I know that I have brilliant kick-ass friends and mentors who have also had this moment. Hopefully they were under their desk.
Can I add, also, I think having a mantra, I know that people are, whether it's Brene Brown or whoever your person, like find that little sound bite that you can also just kind of replay for yourself. My Nana Banana, she's in her 80s, and she's usually pretty critical when she looks at you. She sometimes will give you too much feedback, too straightforward, too blunt. And one time she came to me and she said, Tiffany, you're a thoroughbred, run your own race. And I was like, oh, yeah, get out of here. And like, it stuck with me. She said a million things. That thing has stuck with me. And so when I'm trying to chart my own course, I also find myself playing Nan in my head saying, just run your own race, because it's just too hard sometimes in the spaces to feel competitive. And so I think if you can come up with what that is, that little affirmation, have your mantra, even if you're saying it under your desk.
Mine is like a boss. One of my mentors, I will credit her for that. When I was a young Politico early on in my career, she encouraged me the importance of keeping that list of accomplishments and celebrating those successes along the way, because it's so easy to get caught up and not take the time to celebrate those. And for her, every time I did, I would celebrate something, and she would be like a boss. It's important for you to know, like, this is what you showing up as a boss looks like. So for me, it's become something that a mantra that I've incorporated, not only for myself, but for those within my personal and professional circles as well.
I also want to hear if the representative has a mantra, but I did want to mention, if you have any questions or answers, there's like some questions that you want answered. There's some fun chat happening that we'll also talk about in a sec, but just wanted to say, go ahead and type those in if you have any questions for the panel, because we'd love to get to those as well. Mine is, I actually went to a workshop about creating sort of your mantra, your thing that you say to yourself. And they said, like, you know, keep it short. I think they would love like a boss. And mine is my knowledge and experience is enough. Because I think we go into those spaces and we don't always know that. So sometimes I say it to myself as I like get out of my car. But as folks are typing in those questions, Representative Caravea, do you have a mantra or anything like that you
You know, I don't. And so maybe I need to work on that. I know that for different situations, I always have sayings that my dad has said. And so those are kind of the things like Tiffany was saying with her Nana, things that my dad says that apply to that specific situation, but not an overall mantra.
And I love that we have somebody in the chat that kind of shared something similar. Stephanie, I don't think you knew this is where we were going, but you know, that a survival-minded med student gave her some advice that said fully 50% of physicians in the US graduate in the bottom half of their med school class, and they still get the title and they still get to be, you know, Dr. Weber, Dr. So-and-so. I think that's such a great point. A friend of mine was having a hard time parenting, right? Because I think that's a place where a lot of people feel like imposters. And hers was, people far dumber than me have done this. Right. And it's so important. So we also had somebody in the chat who mentioned that some studies have shown that imposter syndrome can be just imposter moment. And, you know, Pauline Rose Clance, who kind of coined this term in the 70s, had some different views on it as well. But I think that that's something that can be really helpful, is to remember that this is this moment, right? This is not forever. I don't always feel this way. I won't always, you know, feel like I'm the outsider. And thinking of it in discrete moments may also be helpful for folks. Tiffany, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say also, there is a big difference between being uncertain and unsure versus being unqualified. We all have moments of uncertainty or being unsure, and we're just taking some risks and we're taking some chances that may end in victory or failure. But I think sometimes those two get interchanged, that because you're unsure, you're unqualified, and that's simply not the case. So I think also just making that little distinction in those moments, that they're not the same thing, and that you want to try your best to separate the feelings from the facts. The facts is you're awesome and you're feeling a little uncertain. So I think that's just a good distinction in your ballet. Like, am I unqualified or am I just unsure?
And that those qualifications may need to be reevaluated, right? That you probably are qualified, right? Like, you know, even if you're not feeling it, you're probably doing great. And we often have this very narrow definition of professional, right? And who is qualified, and thinking about the genesis of that, right? That oftentimes our ideas of professional or qualified is based around a white male cis hetero norm that might need to get updated, right? My peep toe shoe ain't scandalous. It's just not what men wear. And so the same things about thinking about those definitions, that narrow definition of professionalism might be the other piece of it for folks. I just wanted to flag that as well. Sorry, Sheena, you look like you were about to say something as I check this chat real quick and make sure that we've got everybody.
I was not. I was also checking in on the chat there.
And we've got somebody here who's highlighting that sometimes friends will say things to you to make you feel unsure of your talents or abilities. And that could trigger some limiting beliefs, right? And I think that's absolutely also part of that ability to fail forward and still feel safe, right? But yeah, be aware of who you've got around you. And I'm curious for you all. I happen to think you're fabulous and you're all very accomplished as well. They've got the resumes to prove it, everyone. But talk a little bit about cultivating that, right? We've got in the chat somebody kind of talking about, you know, maybe not all circles are awesome, right? And you might have folks around you that are trying to maybe bring up those limiting beliefs in you. And so what have you all done to cultivate those really successful peer groups? This is one of the things that we do without even thinking.
Yes. Well, mine does entail a lot of intentionality. I'm very blessed to have had some amazing mentors over the years, but I didn't share a lot of my identities with any of them. Two of them were men. One was a woman. She's actually a Franciscan Catholic nun. There's a whole lot of things we don't have in common there. But for me, I wanted to be that mentor that I didn't have growing up. So started mentoring young politicos in these spaces. And it was through doing that, I recognized that I was having a lot of the same conversations over and over and over again, specifically about imposter syndrome. And it was, I had one of my mentors, Brandon, tell me, like, Sheena, you've been doing this work almost 20 years. If you still walk into rooms to this day and still feel this, like, what does that mean for me? And it's like, whoa, all right, we're going there this morning. But for me, it is and was very intentional in kind of crafting those folks, the Amandas and the Yadiras and the Tiffanys of the world in my spaces that I could reach out to. And as Tiffany mentioned earlier, it's important to have a mix of those folks that can, be your cheerleaders, be behind you, dismissing all the bullshit that's out there. But it's also important to have those folks who are honest and can be like, Sheena, what were you doing applying for a director of fundraising when you have zero fundraising experience? No. So as Tiffany pointed out, I think it's important to have folks that that you share identity or experiences with, so that way they know where you're coming from. Folks that are going to have your back, but folks that you also know are going to be honest and keep it real with you.
I think one thing, I had a mentor once that when I came to her, she posed the question, do you just need me to listen or do you need help solving this problem? Because I think sometimes the imposter syndrome comes because all of a sudden you're talking about how you're feeling and people are telling you how to correct it and redirect it and fix it. And I'm like, oh, no, I just wanted you to hear me out. So as I am trying to work with people in our organization or in the circles I'm in, I try and pause and ask, what are they needing from me? Do they need to listen or do they need to solve the problem? Also, I had a friend once say, who owns this problem? Because I was taking on all the world's problems. So when people come to me, I often will also think, like, who owns this problem? Like, do you actually own this? Or are you just taking it on? And so I tend to be more inquisitive. When I was really little, if I told my mom I wanted to be a rainbow, she'd be like, you're so beautiful and bright and colorful. You can be the best rainbow in the world. My dad would be like, have you ever met anyone that was a rainbow? Do you have a plan? And so as I started to think about people kind of living their best lives and being their best selves, also trying to help, can I help you make a plan? Can I help you have some steps along the way? Because maybe I could have been a rainbow, I just didn't know how to get there. And my dad raising that question almost stopped me from thinking it was a possibility. I didn't want to be a rainbow, y'all. But to that point, I had some bigger aspirations than that. But I think sometimes when people ask questions, it puts you in a quick pause. And so when I'm trying to cultivate this among the people in my circles, I try and think, like, is there something I could do to help them make a plan? So.
Like I said, I don't have a mantra, but I have sayings that my dad had always said growing up. And one was aprende en pellejo ajeno. So like learn from somebody else's experiences and observe people and see kind of what they've gone through and how they're dealing with it. And I find that I still look for people who I want to be when I grow up. I am a grown up, I guess, technically, but I feel like there's always growth there. And so, there's people like Susan Lantine who were women, and that's probably about the last, and Democrats, and that's probably the last things that we share in common in terms of our background, but I want to be her when I grow up. And I've told her that, and that I watch her all the time, and that I pick up on how she acts, how she makes decisions, how she learns, because there's always something to learn from the people around you.
I love that. Thank you so much to our panelists for being the folks that I can learn from and who I want to be when I grow up. And so I very much appreciate you all sharing your time and expertise with me, as well as everybody who attended today. I want to thank all of you for being part of this community, both this Denver Startup Week, and I hope that we will continue to connect, to share, to grow together. I know everybody on this panel, I hope you now are a believer in what the experts that they are. And I hope I speak for everyone, but happy to help, be a thought partner with any of you all as well. So I encourage the panelists also to reach out to each other, and for those attending to reach out to us, because I know we would love to continue the conversation. So thank you, everyone.